basis of our plan is to have the Federal Reserve back in the business of looking at monetary policy and not doing more of these bailouts. The Democrats are pushing a plan now that would actually have kind of a revolving door on this thing, where you have perpetual bailouts. We're saying no more bailouts. Get the government out of that business of picking winners and losers, and let's instead get back to the issue of not creating inflation in the first place. One of the things people forget is that when the Fed wasn't being mindful of this, when the central banks were setting interest rates at such a low period of time for so many years, they were actually creating a boom in the housing market. There was something else the government was doing to help create that. We were taking government-sponsored enterprises like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and we were allowing them to arbitrage and over-leverage 100 to 1. Now, that was something Congress did. At the same time, we told them, in your portfolio, we want half of that portfolio to be subprime loans and Alt-A loans. Again, who would have bought up those bad subprime loans, except for the fact you had this arbitrage going on by Fannie and Freddie? So what we've seen through the government involvement into the economy is that it helped create that boom in the housing in the housing side, where 1 out of every 3 loans were people flipping homes, taking advantage of the fact that the government was extending this credit. And then second, we see now today these bailouts, which I voted against. And so our legislation says no more bailouts. I think that's a very important position to have right now. Well, I think one of the reasons it's desirable and necessary is because the one function the Fed has, which is to keep a stable monetary unit. In other words, keep the dollar steady and strong and not create this boom and bust. That's not what the Fed has been of late focused on. The Democrats have controlled the Congress for the last 2.5 years, and as a result, we've had the bailout bills go through, we've had subsequent bailouts, and we've got the Fed now involved, along with Treasury, in direct intervention into the economy. I don't like the way in which this has turned out. And in particular, I don't like Congress leaning on governmental entities in order to pick certain companies or subsidiaries, have them open in some districts, close them in other districts. Here's what I see overall. I see the government now controlling or running GM, running Chrysler, the government in so many of these financial institutions like AIG, picking winners and losers in our economy. I see the government now in the energy with cap and trade coming in, and it's going to control that sector of the economy. And now, next week we're going to see the healthcare plan, the government take over healthcare, again with the government controlling that. Don't you think it's time that we have an audit of what the government's doing with the power we've already given it? Because we've given it power that in ways have been misused in order to create some of the very conundrums we're in today, just as I explained with Fannie and Freddie. And I will add to that CRA, another government program, Community Reinvestment Act, where we forced banks, we actually bullied banks to make loans they never would have made. And it's the government that forced the institutions to go from 20% down to 3% down to 0% down in loans. I mean, that's the kind of problem that comes about when you have political meddling instead of the market, and you lose market discipline as a result. The bad precedent started in the first stimulus package, I don't doubt will lead to another concept here for another stimulus bill. Here's what's happened. I mean, unemployment's continued to go up. I think a lot of confidence has been lost. So investment that might otherwise come into our economy, my worry, is having investors leave the U.S. and invest in Europe or elsewhere around the world because they get cold feet about the fact that decisions are increasingly being made on a political basis rather than on an economic one. So what I'd like to do is have government return to its proper role. There's one other thing that I think is really a problem here. Every time we have $1 trillion of bailouts, it's not like we have that money in this economy. We are borrowing it from overseas. We're borrowing it from China and other countries. We have to pay that back with interest. When the market sees that we continue to do that and watches deficits, go from 1 trillion to 2 trillion, the perception of the market is that, well, this economy is not going to get healthy again because of the sheer amount of borrowing. And so I think we're digging ourselves into a deeper hole here. And that, again, is why I really hope that we'll return to some measure of fiscal sanity. Let me make another observation. Originally, when I heard this idea of a government stimulus, I thought it was going to go to infrastructure. Less than 6% of this went to infrastructure. It went to expand the size of every government bureaucracy, agency, department. I've looked at the individual increases in government spending in these areas. What we're doing is we're shrinking the private economy and we're expanding the size of the federal government. Again, I don't think that's going to get us out of the problem. So no, I am not in favor of an additional bailout, which will be a political process around here as we watch lobbyists scurry to try to get funds to bail out their particular sector or industry. I think this is at the expense of the American people and at the expense of free enterprise and the stability of our system long term.